welcome to Long Distance Review, and on this week's episode I'm going to look at the new album from Weezer, entitled Van Weezer. This will be Weezer's 15th studio album, and actually their second album in 2021, after the release of the brilliant OK Human earlier in the year, which was much more of an orchestral album. This album was actually started recording way back in 2018, and they'd mentioned this album quite a lot in interviews, even before the Black Album was released and things like that. So I started looking back on Weezer's career, and there aren't many bands out there who've had such a roller coaster of a career as Weezer had, in terms of the quality of their output, really. Because they started on such a high when they were formed back in 1992, when they released the Blue Album and Pinkerton to such critical and cult acclaim. They then went on hiatus for a bit, came back and had this sort of mid-level period in the early 2000s of the albums Maladroit, the Red Album, Make Believe, which was before the Red Album, and they were okay albums, had some really good singles off those albums, but they then went on this bit of a dip, I thought, at the end of the year, 2000s, in 2009, 2010, with the release of Raditude and Hurley, which were both quite badly received, and to be honest, I didn't really like them either. Then they had this resurgence with the album Everything Will Be Alright in the End, and then the brilliant White Album was released in 2016. I love the White Album. I think it was an absolutely brilliant album. They then released the sonically different and more diverse electro-sounding Pacific Daydream in 2017. Then the whole covering songs thing happened, where they covered Africa and the internet went mad, and they released the covers album, the Teal album, in 2019, which was a bit of a joke and not a great album. I guess some people might like it, but to me, yeah. But anyway, they released that in 2019, and then they released the much anticipated and ultimately quite disappointing Black Album, which came out in the same year, 2019. And then, as I already said, this year they've already released one album, OK Human, which was kind of a lockdown album, which they did, which was brilliant. So they've sort of been a bit of an up and down career in terms of their quality. So really, also sonically, it's difficult to know what to expect from Weezer. Like I said, you got the more orchestral album at the start of the year, OK Human. You had the electro pop sounding Black Album, Pacific Daydream, the more rockier stuff on the White Album. So really, what is it you're going to get from this album? So it's sometimes surprising to know what Weezer are going to do, but when they call an album Van Weezer and put their kind of stable out there of like, this is the metal album, this is the rock album, we're going to call it Van Weezer in a tribute to Van Halen, it's going to be an 80s metal influenced album, you kind of know what you're going to get. We actually had the first taste of this album way back in 2019 when they released the first single off it, which was in anticipation of the actual release of the album, which was meant to be in May 2020, prior to the tour they were going to do with Green Day and Fall Out Boy, which inevitably, due to COVID, was put back. So this album has actually been put back a year and finally gets a release date in May 2021. My first question when putting the album on really is, what is this? Is this going to be a joke? Is this going to be a novelty album? Or is this going to be a serious Weezer album? Thankfully, it's a lot closer to a serious Weezer album than anything else, but it does frustratingly dip into novelty every now and again, which I'll get into a little bit more. I'll put it out there, I really like this album. Actually, I do really like this album, but find elements of it frustrating. This isn't a metal album. Calling it Van Weezer is a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's not a joke album, it's not a metal album, it's more of a pastiche at times, but it's a Weezer rock album. It's Weezer rock songs like Maladroit, or even like the Blue Album, really, but with bigger riffs, solos, guitar squeals, and the odd 80s metal Easter egg hidden away in there. And when you put it on, you can't help but smile at the opening of The End of the Game, where it has sort of a nod to Van Halen's Eruption with that guitar opening. And it's a gloriously well-written rock song, and it's what Weezer do really, really well. They write incredibly well-constructed, catchy, hooky rock songs, and that was no different. In fact, this album really bursts out the traps. The first 5 songs on this album are all really, really solid. You get Hero is probably my favourite Weezer rock song they've released in a long time, easily since the White Album. It's got this stomping sing-along chorus to die for that will go down really well live, and you get a song like I I Need Some of That, which could easily be lifted off like the Red album. It's just a really solid opening to the album. The first 5 tracks, really solid. Some of the best opening to a Weezer album in a long, long time. Rivers Cuomo has always said, lyrically, Rivers, if you're a Weezer fan, you know after the Pinkerton album, he always said he wouldn't write much more personal lyrics. And although that isn't strictly true, there are personal songs along the road, his lyrics have always been a bit of a sticking point with some Weezer tracks. They can be a little bit cringy, they can be a little bit off-putting at times because they can be a bit stupid, but when the songs and the music is that hooky and catchy and melodious, you kind of forgive them. And here's my kind of problem with it, because you hit the middle of this album where you get to a song like Blue Dream, which has the riff from Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train, not like a nod to it, the actual riff of Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. And it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb because it sounds like a novelty song. It sounds like a covers song. It shouldn't be on here. It sounds like it should be on a covers album. And it's like they're trying to desperately meld Weezer with 80s metal because it's on this album. Then you get the follow-up song after that, which is One More Hit, which is probably the worst song on here, which has this sort of Metallica-style opening riff, but it has these clumsily written lyrics, like I was mentioning, over the top about drug addiction, and it just sounds a bit cringy and a bit clumsy, and it doesn't really work. My problem is this album is when they take the idea a little bit too far. With Blue Dream and One More Hit, it feels forced when it should be just easy them to write rock songs. It feels like they're forcing this 80s metal influence into the songs, and it comes across as a little bit of a mess. When this album works brilliantly is when the album sits in the same bracket of Weezer writing big rock songs with added riffs, and that's when it works really, really well. This album is a tight 31 minutes long, so it's not outstaying its welcome, and these little frustrations are really kind of minor frustrations, but do annoy me because it could have been perfect, this album, I thought. The album does pick up again towards the end, actually, with a song like Sheila Can Do It, which sounds like this sort of surf rock style song that could be lifted from the Blue album. You get the simple and effective She Needs Me, which is a really good song as well, and the closing acoustic number of Precious Metal Girl with its lyrical nods to the 80s metal scene rather than musically. It's a really decent Weezer album. It's hidden under some frustrating choices I think they made. It has like I say, it's 31 minutes long. It's a tightly constructed, hooky, catchy rock album. But because they set their stall out with this Van Weezer, they kind of trod on a very, very tight path along this 31 minutes. And when it stays on that path of Weezer rock songs, it works really, really well. When it starts straying into this novelty and jokey bit, it kind of falls away a little bit. The bands do sound like they're having a lot of fun on this album, though. And it does sound like a bit of a blast. It's such an easy listening album, and I think it's their best collection of songs since the White Album, easily. So there you go. Let me know what you think of Van Weezer by Weezer. I think it's really, really good, barring a couple of minor issues with it. But yeah, very good. A good Weezer album, and the second good Weezer album of 2021. Not as good as OK Human, a good Weezer album. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back soon with another review. Thanks very much.